Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you all are having a great time at the summit. Thank you all for joining us for the 22nd edition of the World Sustainable Summit, India's premier platform for deliberating the discourse around sustainability and climate change. As we proceed further, it is my great privilege to host all of you on behalf of the entire WSDS and TERI family. My name is Amin Shams, and I will be introducing a great panel who would be deliberating on today's thematic on crop-based agricultural systems and climate adaptive solutions. With this, I would now request Dr. Purvi Mehta, Deputy Director, Global Growth and Opportunity, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, to give her welcome remarks. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you very much. And welcome everyone. Nice to be here. I was in the morning making a remark that this event feels like a mini COP. So congratulations to all the organizers. I see many members from the TERI family. Congratulations for this. I think this session is about the title says crop systems and adaptive solutions. We have a panel which will be talking about the various components of it, but in the opening, I just wanted to expand the title a little bit by sort of highlighting that when we say crop systems, especially from a developing country perspective, it is actually agriculture system because of the tight links between crop and everything else that happens around agriculture. One of my favorite things to say in this kind of a forum where crop looks like a major focus is that over 83% of India's milk, for example, does not come from crop farmer or from livestock farmer. It comes from farmers, crop farmers who also happen to keep livestock. And also, the dependency on feed over the recent report is saying that we continue to be dependent on crop residue as feed and not so much on feed crops. And therefore, I think that linkage is, it's very important to talk from that agriculture perspective and agriculture system perspective, which is going to be very important. While saying that, I think, of course, markets and post-harvest parts of the value chain is very important, but at the same time, not just looking at the output of agriculture, but also the outcome of agriculture, which is nutrition. And we know that, climate and any discussions that we have around climate is going to have a major impact on nutrition, not just because of the affordability and accessibility issue, which of course is very important, also because the diversified commodities that I spoke about, which also are nutritious commodities often, these are also grown predominantly in developing country by smallest of the smaller farmer. And therefore, as climate change or any of these sustainability debates has an impact on agriculture, on food production, on food security, it also has a very direct impact on nutrition security. And so, of course, from a quantity perspective, but from quality perspective also, for example, higher carbon dioxide level, as we know, is showing very, very robust evidences of bringing down, especially zinc and iron content in many, many commodities. So I think it needs to be, the system needs to be seen from a holistic perspective. The second word, I'm really glad that this panel is focusing on adaptation and not climate change in general. I think we do need that kind of a focused approach in this. As many of you know, the Gates Foundation now has become one of the largest investors in agriculture and climate change. This was not true about 2 years ago. We have very recently announced some people call it the world's largest climate portfolio in terms of agriculture adaptation. But the reason we wanted to focus on adaptation fundamentally is because adaptation requires much more investment. Why do I say that? You know, last year's data, for example, close to 47% of the total money that came in climate or in the climate area entirely came from the MDBs. And I see a lot of presence of MDBs, the multilateral development banks in this summit. A lot of a major investor into climate related work, right? But so they brought in something like $81 billion last year in terms of their investments into climate. But close to $68 billion went only into mitigation related work. So mitigation, absolutely very, very important, but adaptation requires a lot of attention, especially from smallholder perspective, especially from developing country agriculture perspective. And therefore, I think focusing on adaptation and not just mitigation. I mean, the ideal would be adaptation with mitigation as co-benefit, but I think the focus on adaptation, therefore, globally is going to be very important. And the third and the last point I wanted to make is about taking a global, or more specifically, taking a regional approach in this kind of thing, rather than taking a country by country approach, because of the transboundary nature of these challenges that we are talking about. And therefore, especially as we are in South Asia, I am reminded that, within the region, collaboration in South Asia actually is among the lowest in the world. And so I think more collaboration in this kind of things between various countries in South Asia will be very, very important. And I'm really glad that organization like BIMSTEC, I think the Secretary General was to be here, are investing into that. And I really appreciate the way, for example, Shahid Ifri and others are working from a regional approach on some of these issues. So with that, I'm looking forward to the panel and looking forward to a discussion that is, as I said, slightly beyond just crop systems, but looking at production system, profitability systems, which is the market-related system, and how that can bring resilience, and also focusing on adaptation solutions. So thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. We now have Mr. Siddharth Chaturvedi, Senior Program Officer, Agricultural Development, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, as the moderator for the session. I welcome you, sir. I request you to kindly take the session forward. He will also be introducing the fantastic panel we have for you today. Over to you, sir.
Siddharth's voice is not coming through. Can you hear us now?
Yes, of course. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. So I have just made the introductions, Dr. Ananda. And with us, again, I'll repeat for your benefit, we have Dr. Shahidur Rashid. He's the Director, South Asia FPRI. Dr. Kiran Sharma, who's Senior Director, TERI. And of course, Dr. Purvi Mehta, who made the opening remarks. And I was just saying that this is a panel is so rich. You can go into their bios and maybe do a PhD on them. So I'll not get into the detailed bios of each speaker. You can get into it by yourself. What I would really want the speakers actually to start with is based on the opening remarks that Dr. Mehta just made on the importance of adaptation in crop systems or agricultural systems. And there's a rich experience that each of the panelists bring. What are some of the experiences that you have, and how do you see the landscape of adaptation in agriculture moving forward? And then we'll maybe come to some of the specific questions. And if I can start with Dr. Kiran.
Thanks. Thanks, Siddharth. Good morning to everyone. Thanks for that introduction. So I'm Kiran Sharma with the TERI, looking after the Sustainable Agriculture Program. So I think Purvi basically covered the whole session here by putting the perspective on agricultural systems, because agricultural systems are not alone. They come with a whole package of practices, and crop definitely is one of the very important ones. Can I go on, or you want to? Okay. So crop-based agriculture systems is especially they need to address issues related to the many other factors as well. I will just briefly touch them, but these were some of the deliberations of a workshop we recently had in Delhi itself. That some of these, there's a pressing need to address issues related to the governance, I think, in agriculture systems. What we found was the data is also missing. Data information, analysis, finance, innovations, and capacity building, so that we can reduce the climatic stresses, especially the water, in the agricultural food systems. So a system approach to sustainable and resilient agricultural systems management can help by focusing on intervention areas that jointly improve water, food, and nutritional security. And hence they support farmers' livelihoods. So specific solution-based approach are needed to address climate adaptation challenges in the agricultural sector. So in terms of governance, I think what we found was some of the key limiting factors linked to governance include poor management between institutions, especially coming from ministries and other institutions involved in agriculture, lack of coordination, convergence, and interaction between various actors. Besides, there is also a need to focus on water budgeting, because that's a very, very important component of any agriculture system, especially in the rain-fed agriculture, where 70% of agriculture is dependent on rainfall. We don't have systems for water auditing, water accounting, and water management techniques to improve on-farm productivity. Data was rated as very high in some of these discussions we had. There's lack of total data at the national level or between the countries. How do they share, especially its quality and monitoring? Some of the issues include non-collation of existing data with available facilities, dearth of observation stations, absence of meso and micro analysis, especially in the case of river basins. The availability of data is only at the state level, and the lack of accurate data. So no one has really curated that. So we need a holistic approach, especially in terms of data collection. Planning, which should be based on demand rather than on allocation of resources. Inventory to collect data must be made by identifying the gaps in the available data. There's a need for standardization of some of these data in a common format for accuracy, quality assurance, and accurate aggregation and disaggregation, so that users can be enabled to process and analyze this data. Complementing traditional approaches based on ground-based monitoring networks and modern data approaches such as IoTs and artificial intelligence would be critical for building climate resilience and better utilization of water and natural resources. I think there's also a very important need to bring in the innovations here, especially the innovations coming from the startup ecosystem, which is growing very fast, but somehow it's being, I don't know whether it's properly being addressed because everyone seems to be working in isolation. Because these innovations, they provide breakthrough solutions for critical water-related challenges and also enhancing water use efficiency in agriculture system. So some of the interventions we thought were promotion of energy farming, which helps in financing renewable energy. That's what we call photovoltaics, where you can actually have both energy generation at the same time not compromising on crop productivity. The current systems do not offer such opportunities. Strengthen the existing system by sensor-based climate and water monitoring systems, promoting startups on innovating low-cost technologies which help in sustainability, and specifying the role of government sector in promoting these startups. We need to focus on developing nature-based solutions for the specific regions as well, and also developing place-based and scalable solutions and innovative approaches for agricultural water management. So these, I think, are some of the interventions that are very important in the agricultural system, what Purvi was talking about. But very importantly, I think being a crop scientist, I would, Purvi was mentioning that, crop is an important part of this agriculture system. We need to have develop climate resilient crops, especially the new varieties that can tolerate the variations in water availability. I won't call it droughts, but availability. Sometimes it's too much water, sometimes it's less water. Besides also developing resistance to various diseases and pests, especially having early maturing varieties and also photoperiod insensitivity, so that some of these crops can fit into new niches or new cropping systems. So that's where I think the interventions in crop improvement are very, very important. Purvi was also mentioning about nutritionally enriched crop varieties. And I think we need to look at mainstreaming nutrition in agriculture. The new crop varieties have to have the nutritional attributes built into it. I think some of the projects which are being funded by Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and implemented by Harvest Plus global program, I think they gave the word of biofortification. Now, biofortification means you're bringing in nutrition as well into your breeding pipelines. For example, we already have products with high beta carotenes or high iron and zinc. New pearl millet varieties have been released, wheat varieties are there, and these are all being supported at the global level. So I think nutrition enrichment has to be a part of your regular system. And very important, I think, going forward, which again, the BMGF and the CGIR has pioneered, is modernizing your crop improvement itself. Because especially in the public sector, in the developing countries, what we are seeing is we're still following the old practices of crop improvement, which means, a turnover of a new crop variety can take anywhere from 10 to 15 years. And I think with the current changing climatic conditions, we cannot wait for 15 years. If you look at the private sector, they have a new variety every 2 to 3 years. They have a pipeline. So they must be doing something well. And I think this is where the excellence in breeding platform of the CGIAR, which was supported by BMGF, the foundation, and the CG itself, embarked on enabling this CGR centers and also their national agriculture partners in Asia as well as in Africa in devising new ways, modernizing the new system of managing the breeding pipelines, bringing in, using the big data, bring the new traits, specific data into your system, and then make it a part of your breeding system itself. So what it needed was not only the change in thinking, in having better database management, but also better planning for the future, need assessment, what type of traits are actually required, and that too in a country-specific manner or a region-specific manner. And this has actually led to developing facilities as well, better field management, better crop management, but also having a robust pipeline which can actually then continue to feed the new varieties. So besides this improvement of crops, we also need to look at the crop diversification, especially I think when you talk in some of these meetings and conferences, we're seeing, can you move away from some of the crops, based on their regional demands? For example, Punjab producing, so much rice, but the data suggests that probably less than 5% rice is consumed in Punjab. So they're just producing it for someone else, whereas the local producer is not producing. As a result, there is always a drain on the water resources. So we need to look at crop diversification and better crop management. Besides, of course, non-farm employment options, especially livestock, fisheries, and whatever I think is required. So besides crop-based interventions, as I mentioned, we need the proper governance, better climate services, including data collection, curation, and its analysis, and other needs that need to be streamlined for better decision-making, so that the farmers can have information in advance, which then can be used to cope up with the existing environment. I'll just give you one example. Just 2 days ago, I think I read an article in the newspaper. Delhi is already facing high temperatures. I think we are already 7 to 8 degrees above normal right now. And it seems the summer will be advanced. So this is directly going to impact the current wheat crop in the fields. And they're expecting anywhere from 30 to 40% reduction this year. So how do you prepare for these vagaries? I think so. I think everything needs to come together, and I think governance is very, very important. So I'll stop here, but we can continue.
No, thank you, Dr. Sharma. I think you essentially summarized, if I may say, Dr. Shahid, the whole global food policy report in the last 5 minutes. So thanks for that. I think from this point of view, let's move on to our neighbors' point of view, who are actually in policy development, and the host of recommendations that we've heard, Dr. Ananda. And if we can just start with the opening remarks. If I think there was a video that I was told, if there's a video that can be played, or you can, you can deliver it live, whichever way you please.
Video would be great if it is possible, because of the bandwidth thing. So otherwise I can share a few slides and speak.
Yeah, we'll play the video.
Oh, thank you very much.
Good morning. Greetings from Sri Lanka. First of all, our sincere thanks to organizers, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, TERI, and also the people who are behind this valuable conference. So we'd like to talk a few things that might be helpful for the discussion coming up. And the first thing is that we are along with these days, for example, the climate change COP27 is highlighted the valuable points to and the outcomes of the violence and ecosystems and ecosystem services along with adequate financing. So agriculture is in the middle of ecosystem usage. So it's important that we invest on the ecosystem services and products so that the resilience of the agriculture sector remains. And promoting renewable energy and pollution reduction approaches that circularity, cycle analysis, and supply chains, production, science-based values, and are also service practices. And so it's important that we pay attention to this so that we ensure sustainability of our systems. And agriculture is in the from all that, and Sri Lanka is also adopting these approaches through the agriculture policy that is informed by the cabinet ministers. There is also severely climate affected among the top 10 countries. We are seeing the world nights cold nights reducing, intensity of the rain and the conditions going up and changing variability. So the conditions are that the rain is going to be some concern because the temperature results potential degeneration of the affects the nations and also especially dairy significantly. The predictions are that the temperature is going to go up and mechanisms to cool the environments. It's a complex system of agriculture we are dealing with, number of space. So, not only the subject is complex, Sri Lanka as an island landscape is also fairly complex. Switching complexity at the same time, the problem focus to options and the generation and the irrigation facilities and things like that. The ecosystem approaches and multi-stakeholder approaches so that everybody understand and come together so that the agriculture systems can be sustainable. Is the concern and the agriculture contribute significant amount of emissions, especially the segmentation, the waste, metals, nitrates, phosphates, and the latest is plastics. So we're trying to enhance the information of the awareness and communication of these pollutions. So engage the communities and the citizen science approaches and agencies come together to address these issues. At the same time, without ecosystem and economy, it's very difficult to ecosystem services and also pay for these ecosystem services for the sustainability sake. So, systematic ecosystem environment economic techniques and Sri Lanka into the future so that agriculture will significantly. So, for us to collaborate on global insights, and we are using the Indian satellites in many occasions in disaster management. We're looking for collaborations. Special planning techniques to address some of the conflicts in our lives. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Ananda. I think this is a wide range of topics, and you're also taking a holistic approach, I think, to climate change, which will be very helpful to see how it grows, especially in a country that is as vulnerable to climate change. Now, I think we'll move to Dr. Rashid, and there's a host of kind of solutions that Dr. Sharma alluded to, and this year, the Global Food Policy Report also brought in the climate change aspect. So if you could touch upon what prompted kind of bringing in the climate change piece and the nexus of food systems for this year, what prompted that, first of all? And if you could also touch upon on knowing that there are so many solutions out there, some of which we have been trying, like crop diversification, water usage reduction, etc. What does it mean really when we are talking in terms of climate adaptation? What are we essentially doing differently?
Thank you, Siddharth. Can you hear me? Very good. Let me begin by thanking TERI for inviting me and IPRI to this event. It looks like TERI has a very rich tradition of holding this event. So I'd like to begin by congratulating TERI and all the colleagues who kept it going for more than 22 years. If my math is correct, about 22 years. This is a real accomplishment. Congratulations to you. Now, coming back to your question, so I have to say something that I took note of, but that is fine. So the first, I would like to make this broad question about why IPRI did a global food policy report, which is 2022, not 2023. 23 is in the making, and this is going to be on disaster management. So this is going to be different. I think Purvi touched on it very clearly, because we have to think in a system approach. And to do system approach, we have to think as a food system, not as a crop system, not as agriculture system, not as livestock system. We have to think about a food system that include agriculture, food, industries, land use, water, all of this, because it's an integrated system. So the objective was to shed lights on what is available out there, what else can be done to improve the climate or the carbon footprint in our food system, or to minimize their impact in the future, and how to finance them. That was a very important piece of it. That was the context. Now let me begin with a very broad understanding of this issue. Let me clarify that I'm an economist. Personally, I have not done research on climate change. And the chapter that my involvement in the 2022 Global Food Policy Report of IPRI was some engagement. And the chapter I co-authored with my colleague, Avinash Kishore, he is here. So if you have questions, go to him. He can answer all of them. So on a very broad level, I think you don't have to be a climate scientist to observe and feel the impact of climate change. There are many examples, flood in Pakistan, but since we have a title of crop-based system, let me cite an example from India. Remember a year ago, when Ukraine-Russia war started, India had a huge stock of food, mainly wheat. And it was a policy to promote that India could feed the world at this time. Come handy when people were suffering in sub-Saharan Africa, Somalia, there was a hunger and famine-like situation. And India was showing its diplomatic gesture, saying that we can help you in this time. Then came March 19, 2022. It was the hottest month in 100 years. What happened? India had to revise its forecast, crop forecast. And immediately, a surprising announcement, a ban on export of wheat, which had sent shockwave to the global grain market. We felt it. People felt it. The world felt it. So you don't have to be really a scientist unless you have people who think that climate change is hoax. There are people and leaders who think that. It should be very clear, right? So let me come to now your next point that we are talking about on the crop-based system and what we can do about it. Before I go there, let me also say this. For our time that we are living right now, there is a lot of change happening. Structural changes happening, and many of us, CG, International Development Partners, we are trying to promote that kind of structural changes, right? That is happening. Changes in the culture, that is happening. Changes in the technology and the consequences of this disruptive technology can have on the humanity is there on the table. But for a conscious individual observing society, I think nothing is more important than climate change challenges that can have on our future generation. I think that's what keeps us up at night, dealing with those challenges. Now, coming back to the point of what are the solution points? As many of you know, CGIAR system, of which IPRI is a member, worked on climate and agriculture and food security for over 10 years. In 10 years, there was a program in South Asia. They have identified hundreds of climate smart technologies. So if you look at the current landscape, we do have technologies that can minimize water wastage, that can maximize nutrition efficiency management. There are many other solutions out there. But biggest question that we are confronted with, why are they not taking off? Is that because of the economics of them? Partly yes, and we all know that. But from the economic policy perspective, that should not stop us from acting on it. Why? If these has benefit from the climate point of view, from the benefit for the future generation, then it is a responsibility of the society to support them. Instead of supporting free irrigation, instead of giving huge subsidy on food to people who don't need food aid support. So those kind of resources can put into it to scale it up. Now I'll come to the data question of it. Dr. Sharma pointed out from their study, data is clearly critically important. What is more important is the effective utilization of data. Unless you tease out the insights from the data, data don't mean anything. Those are numbers sitting somewhere. So from that point of view, one point I'd like to drive home is that building capacity to understand the investment need, understand the capacity need, understand the financing of implementation are critically important. And the attention in the future, I think we need to pay attention to this to make it more effective. So Global Food Policy Report touched on those points as well. And actually the estimate for the global subsidy bill was $650 billion last year, but could be more than that because the way they estimated, it was very conservative estimate. So the point is, if you can use those resources to address the so-called market failures, then it is very much justified to subsidize those technologies than subsidizing irrigation that incentivizes farmers to overexploit water or overuse fertilizer, which can lead to degradation of soil, which can lead to pollution of the groundwater, depletion of the groundwater, all those challenges, that there's a host of challenges one has to deal with. My last point, Siddharth, is about the regional point of view. The point, I think we have a better burden, more responsibility for South Asia and Southeast Asia in dealing with these challenges. Why? Very simple. Think about it. Rice is the biggest contributor. My colleague Ranjita Pushkar from TERI is smiling, but that is the truth. And if you look at just India and Southeast Asia, that accounts for 78% of land allocated to rice globally. Let me say that again, 78% of land allocated to rice are in South Asia and Southeast Asia, which essentially means that we have a larger burden of responsibility to address them systematically. I'll stop there. Thank you very much.
No, thanks a lot, Dr. Shahid. Yes, please. It's always a pleasure. And I think you really opened it up for all of us to kind of get into specific questions. And I'll start with you, Dr. Mehta, that as you mentioned in your opening remarks as well, that there is a need to kind of focus ourselves also on adaptation. And there's a lot of talk around data availability, data usage, and we need to start also looking at maybe moving from just the data stack and agri stack, maybe call it an adaptation stack. And there is some work that you're leading globally on that. If you could explain how that has come about and what are some of the insights that we can get and how it will be helpful to some of the policymakers as well as practitioners.
Thank you, Siddhartha. I think, both the speakers, Dr. Sharma and Dr. Shahid, emphasized data. It's about the whole data value chain, right? Data collection, data utilization, interpretation of data, and then using data as a tool in evidence-based policy making. I think this is the whole thing. There is a lot of asymmetry in many ways when we look at climate-related data. We do have, quite a lot of understanding. I would not say enough, but very important and quite a lot of understanding in terms of sort of diagnosing the problem. We have really focused a lot of data on diagnosing the problem, whether it is real or not, and we know that it is real. So diagnosing the problem, we've focused a lot. We have very limited data available in really talking about the solution of the problem. There is very little of that. So there is a data asymmetry in what we know and what we need to know much more, right? And therefore, I think this whole stack approach is very important also because the climate-related data that we talk about are not just about agriculture-related data. It is about a lot of other data as well. And therefore, this kind of a stack approach, you mentioned about multi-stakeholder collaboration, various ministries coming together. I think all that is very, very important because it's not just about water, it's not just about land, and within land, a lot of our data is focused upon land, access to land, and the whole climate debate about deforestation and all of that. So there is a lot of data on access to land, but I think climate is also about suitability of land. A farmer can own 200 acres of land which is hit by drought and doesn't produce anything. So a 200-acre land owning farmer can be a very, very poor farmer, even if the land holding may be very, very high. A farmer with 1 hectare of land, but with good climate resilience, can perhaps produce much more on that one. So it's not just about how much land, but it is about what type of land and what. So I think climate requires us to bring in a lot of different types of data. And as you said, Shahid, it's also not just about data. I think data collection, which a lot of us have focused upon, is just a means to an end. It is the utilization of data which is going to be very, very important. And the third part in that utilization is interoperability of data, which again is something that's missing. So one of the things that Siddharth mentioned, we have sort of invested in is what is called as the Adaptation Atlas. Basically, it is like a stack which says, well, what is the problem? What are the solutions? Because a large number of solutions, especially in climate-related work, has to be locally sourced and locally led solutions. So what are the solutions? So I think that kind of a stack approach, bringing in multiple levels of data, bringing in not just diagnosis of the problem, but solution, I think those are the kind of things that is going to be very, very important. And data often, some people may be calling data as a new oil and whatever, but I think data often is an unfelt need. And especially at the farmer level, where adaptation activities, for example, we in the sense we as a world or we as the scientific community have really not done a good job of really bringing in solutions and disseminating at the grassroots level. And therefore, all these data and all that, what does it mean? If I am a farmer in a place in Jharkhand hit by, like 86% of South Asia's farmer, hit by at least one climate-related abiotic stress a year, which kind of destroys my crop and so forth, right? How does it matter to me whether the ministry has a lot of data about me or not? And so we need to take a very pragmatic approach in sort of utilizing the data and making that data be of some relevance to the productivity angle, but also to the profitability angle of the farmer.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Mehta. And, I think the whole use of data and simplification of solutions, I think the whole panel is touching upon. And we really need to do a better job. I think that's a note for all of us. I'll just move to Dr. Ananda again. And it's a very interesting kind of thing that came to my mind when I was just looking at what Sri Lanka is doing. And it all sounds very grim, that climate is so grim. And a country that is so vulnerable to climate change, they have recently developed something known as climate prosperity plan. And I would just want you to kind of explain to us where this kind of came in from. Why are you looking at more on the climate prosperity side? And just maybe speaking in context of agriculture more than other pieces, because I know it's an overarching framework. But it's good to see that you're talking more in terms of prosperity rather than saying, okay, what is not happening and how grim it is.
Thank you. Thank you, Siddha. I think, what we are trying to do in using the word prosperity is to take this doom and gloom out a little bit. As Dr. Mehta mentioned, we have a lot of vulnerable people in the corners and then farmers who are getting hit every season. So, but if you can put a positive spin and start talking science and I think we heard the artificial intelligence, IoT, and all the good things that we could turn around. At the same time, we are talking about the cross subsidies. I think there's a lot of subsidy, as we heard, on supplying water, supplying energy. So we are trying to bring the climate agenda into the erosion agenda, into the pollution agenda, so that, and also the health agenda. So when you connect those multiple sectors and bring several projects that are multi-sector, multi-stakeholder, that lend to a plan like a climate prosperity plan. So as a result, it has a bundle project with energy and agriculture, health, coastal marine, fisheries, all combined. So it's an effort to first to get attention, I would say, and a market piece also. But at the same time, trying to do a good cause, because Sri Lanka, as you know, we are desperate for foreign currency. So we need every dollar possible to come to country. And so we are trying all kind of innovative approaches and also trying to use the existing project ideas. So Climate Prosperity Plan has a list of project ideas that had been there for decades, but hasn't come to fruition. So I think that's, in essence, that's what it is.
No, thanks a lot, Dr. Ananda. Again, thanks for telling us that you're looking out of the doom and gloom and giving ideas as to what can happen. One of the things, again, and I'll request the panel to react also, is Sri Lanka has placed climate change at the office of the president. And one of the things that the panel has kind of reflected is saying we need inter-ministerial collaboration. What it essentially, in a way, means is that although climate change is affecting all the ministries, there is no one point or, so to say, head of the family that can hold the reins of, when we are talking in terms of climate change, climate adaptation in agriculture and across the board. So, Dr. Ananda, if you could just reflect briefly as to why the presidential office kind of took the reins. And then I would request the panelists one by one as to what is there for the region to learn, or how does it get adapted into our own structural systems so that climate change, we start going to a single kind of a door saying this is where climate change is accountable.
Thanks. I think one of the reasons that happened was it's not a permanent thing we are envisaging, but sense of urgency was missing, and we were losing a lot of climate opportunities in Green Climate Fund and many other blended financing options. So at the same time, we saw the need to connect the finance ministry to the coastal marine, to the tourism So it was a difficult task. If you look at the Sri Lankan ministry structure, it is also not to our advantage. It's little bit diverse and digressed. So that's why the president wanted the immediate jumpstart and then brought that into his purview. But it is not considered as a permanent measure, but as a way to take the Sri Lanka climate agenda and the other agendas together and to bring the real value and the synergy. Thank you. Over.
Thank you. Can we have some reactions starting with Dr. Kiran, please?
Sure. I think the governance part, as I mentioned, is very, very important. And as you're mentioning, in Sri Lanka, everything is under the president's office. Unfortunately, that's not happening everywhere because there are different aspects of water. There is the groundwater, there is green water, blue water, water treatment. Sorry. And each one is looked after by a different ministry or a different department. Then you have the federal departments, and then you have the state departments of, agriculture and various other. So how do you really bring all these together at the times when there is excess water, or at times when water is really required? And then how do you do the water budgeting, between the state policies, for example? Now, sometimes the federal government has, certain policies, but they cannot be implemented at the state level because the state has a very different agenda altogether. One of the discussions we had in our workshop I was mentioning to you, late last year, was there's no cropping pattern. The example of Punjab, for example, they're producing so much rice, at the cost of water. And then, apparently Madhya Pradesh is also trying to produce rice. And that land actually was supposed to be good for pulses. Now, it's just an economic opportunity. So there was a thought that should we also have what we call special cropping zones, like you have special economic zones, where the government allocates a particular region for a particular type of economic activity, whether it is pharmaceuticals or whether it's electronics. So why can't we have something similar in agriculture as well, where you have special cropping zones, depending on what is available, what are the natural resources available in those regions. But to do all that, I think there's much more has to be done. There's the different departments, ministries, different stakeholders, farmers, farming groups, they have to come together and, decide on this. If in Telangana we have a particular region devoted only to rice, then that should grow rice, not other things. And where there is less water, maybe let's introduce other crops which demand less water. So I think that a sense, it will take a lot of evolution. It will take a lot of, so maybe the approach what Sri Lanka is suggesting, having this whole agriculture under the president's office might provide, that type of networking for much better utilization of natural resources. And also, of course, the data collection, not only collection, but aggregation and having a policy at the national level. What should Karnataka be doing? What should Punjab be doing? Maybe that's one utopian type of approach. Thank you.
Dr. Mehta, any reactions from you?
Yeah, thanks. I mean, yes, I completely agree that, climate is everybody's concern and no one's accountability often. So I think that is absolutely true. But it's not that we are starting completely from scratch. There are some very interesting ways the world is trying to deal with it also, like Sri Lanka having this as a president in the president's office. Over, I think the last January, the count was 37. This may have changed. At least 37 countries in the world have a separate ministry to deal with climate change. So there are ways people are looking at. two very interesting mechanisms there. One is the NAPs that countries are coming up with, the National Adaptation Plan. The National Adaptation Plan, per its format itself, talks about some of these cross-cutting governance structures. So there are, I mean, I'm not preaching a national adaptation plan for any country. There are lots of challenges with most NAPs. How are we going to implement? Lots of questions about it. But this governance, fundamental governance question is part of the NAP's format, and a lot of countries, therefore, are sort of responding to that. And one very interesting part of any of this kind of thing is the climate finance, right? A lot of climate financing facilities, for example, the GCF, or for example, in some ways, people like us or several of them have now started asking these very tough questions and not putting their money into one ministry or other, but putting it in the centralized mechanism. So I think, yes, there is a lot of change. Yes, there are a lot of concerns about it. But at the same time, there are some interesting approaches the world is taking in solving that problem.
Purvi told me that this was going to be her fourth session, but she seems to be alert and making to-the-point comments. So, Siddharth, on that question, I actually applaud Sri Lankan leadership to put it in the Prime Minister's office. Execution of policies of everything else requires commitment. And if that commitment doesn't come from the top, things don't get done. I will share two experiences. One from Africa, because we are talking about Global South, one from Asia. So when the Green Revolution started, CG system started, Africa and Asia had almost equal number of CG centers. We did not see a Green Revolution in Africa, but we did see one in Asia. And people can debate, but one of the fundamental reasons is the commitment that the governments of Asian governments made in those years of the late 60s, early 70s. Second example from Africa is I was involved in setting up Ethiopian Agricultural Transformation Agency. The question was, again, the challenge is inter-ministerial coordination, which is very complex given the bureaucracy of it. So when we are doing diagnostic studies, then idea was that where can it go? And then Prime Minister said, okay, I will take the responsibility. We'll create this empowered organization that can drive that transformation. But that was nothing new, revolutionary concept. Concept was there. I mean, South Korea did that. Taiwan did that in the 50s. I mean, South Korea was poorer than Ethiopia after the war, but they were able to manage this transformation because one of the main reasons was that high level of commitment. In Bangladesh, which is my country, they have had some very good success in promoting a digital technology. So one of the commitment of the Prime Minister was Digital Bangladesh. That was the slogan. And what they had done, they created a unit called A2I, Access to Information, highly empowered body. As a result, the changes that you could see, I have not seen, EL I think is doing a study, we'll see more results in the future, but the spread of technology, despite all other challenges in the country, was remarkable because of that commitment. I think in that sense, this is really needed. If we take climate change, mitigation, adaptation agenda seriously, there has to be commitment from the highest level. I think in that sense, I applaud Sri Lanka for taking that initiative. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Shahid. And I think what is needed maybe is more of pushing and understanding of structures rather than coming up with new ideas, as you're saying, this has already been done earlier. It's more about maybe pushing more that this is needed and how it will look like. I'll just kind of change gears here and and move more on the private sector side, because they are as much a party as the policymakers are. And as Dr. Mehta said, that everyone's responsible, but no one is accountable. I would just kind of paraphrase it with her permission, saying that climate change is everyone's business, but it's not yet a business. And that's the reason perhaps technology proliferation, simplification of technology, as you said, we have like 100 technologies around various issues, are not really going in. And again, I'd want to get Dr. Sharma's reaction first on this, because you were managing the agribusiness and innovation platform at ICRISAT in your earlier avatar, and you must have seen a lot of new technologies coming up. Some of them digital, some of them maybe mechanization, etc. But the whole piece of going to market and then going to a certain amount of scale is the issue. The incubation or the idea is not. So in your experience, what do you see as some of the enablers that can actually make it a business, and second, make it scale?
Thanks for that question. I think it's very close to my heart. So we set up India's first agribusiness incubator way back in early 2000s. And I think it was based on the need that agriculture technologies, sitting in the lab, what do you do from bench to field? Why there is a gap? I myself have been the bench scientist. And the question we keep asking ourselves, what next? How do you go next? Many technologies just keep sitting at the lab stage and don't get translated. And that's where I think this whole ecosystem of startup or agribusiness or innovation platforms, I think, emerged. It started with the Department of Science and Technology earlier. They set up a lot of incubators, but they were all around material sciences, where you have a very tangible product, which what it can do and where it has to go. Agriculture is a very, very complicated topic. We are just discussing that. There's so many different aspects of agriculture we're dealing with. There's technology, there is smallholder farmers who cannot afford big technologies. There's a last mile connectivity. So that's where I think this whole ecosystem of agribusiness startup is very important. And I'm glad to see in India, I think it's really picked up. India is now number 3 in terms of the startup ecosystem. And I still deal with a lot of incubators, help with the mentorship of some of these startups. And I find there are a lot of ideas on the ground. The problem is the mentorship. They don't know, their first generation startups who don't know what next. They all come with very brilliant science ideas. But again, translating them into practical solutions is always a challenge. So one of the options is, can this whole ecosystem in different institutions be internalized to an extent that whenever you're producing a new technology, you always look at the end product, where it is going to move. For example, in TERI, we have seen, we have spent a lot of effort in developing nano fertilizers. Now, you have to chalk out a roadmap on where this technology will move. Now, the scientists within TERI can produce use science, produce technologies, nano fertilizer, get them, make sure they're safe, get them approved. But the next mile connectivity, I think, lies either at a startup business or engaging with the larger companies who can then work with the smaller, complete that last mile connectivity. And that's proven very successful, where some of the big fertilizer companies have actually come in, taken the technologies, and then working at the local level or regional level. So that connectivity is very important, especially to promote that ecosystem. There are a lot of people who are willing to take up entrepreneurship as a job. Instead of seeking jobs, even if one a successful startup comes in, he or she can provide at least 8 to 10 jobs. So this has a multiplier effect. And they're not looking at very big profits. They're village level, especially working with FPOs, for example, farmer producer organizations, we have invested so much money in setting up thousands of FPOs. But what's the problem of FPOs? They are again not very well linked to the markets. The technology flow is a problem. So that's where I think this startup ecosystem can help. It's moving in India. I think it'll take some more time before it gets internalized, before the government schemes actually start paying off in terms of helping these startups, identifying them, and then providing support to them.
No, thanks. Thanks, Dr. Sharma. Dr. Shahid, you too, in your opening remarks, mentioned about the subsidies, right? And that there are a lot of fertilizer subsidies, irrigation subsidies, and perhaps some effort can go around scale up of technology, or maybe some development of technology. So if you could just unbundle it a bit further, saying what are some of the policy instruments and also some of the program instruments that can actually come and play this role, especially as Dr. Sharma said, agriculture is complicated. Mm-hmm. The startup ecosystem has really taken off. We know that. But at the same time, it's more, ag tech, and it's more focused on organized markets. Means how we are still weeding, the women are still bending down and weeding. There are really no low cost technologies that you are alluding to. So what could be those some of those policy or program instruments that you think can really help, and therefore present a picture that, okay, fertilizer subsidy can go down slightly, and this will be a catalytic change if we can maybe reallocate some of the budgets?
It's a bit difficult question, but I'll try my best. Before I get to that question, let me make a quick point about your rephrasing Purvi's comment or the statement, climate change is everyone's business, but nobody's responsibility. And your proposal was, can we make climate change everyone's profitable business? Actually, that question has been asked. And there was a report, if I'm not mistaken, from the IMF trying to figure out how many employments can climate smart investment generate. The number was staggering. The question is, those are model-based analysis. To go into implementation, make that happen, that is a long way. I think that's what is needed. And like the way Sri Lanka is thinking now, we can look at those models that predicts that billions of dollars worth of business related to tackling climate change, then it becomes a real business proposition where private sector has the incentive to invest and gain from mitigating climate change. I think that would be ideal solution, and that happens in my lifetime. Now, coming back to the subsidy issues, don't get me wrong, subsidy had its role. I give this example, so I see younger audience here, so I'll cite it again. CGIAR system, it's a consultative group for international agricultural research, commemorated the 50th anniversary last year. So it was established 50 years ago. At that time, 50 years ago, India and the entire South Asia was dependent on something called sheep to mouth, meaning we were all dependent on food aid. If food aid didn't come, we would starve. From there, now, India is fifth largest funder of the CG system globally. This is a real turnaround, and many of the policies that we are talking about, including irrigation subsidies, including stocking policies, including food subsidies, played a critical role. But in policy making, what is important is to understand when to get in and when to get out. So getting out part is very difficult because this is some kind of incentive you give it to farmers or consumers that get used to them, that create coalition, that create power, and they cannot get out of it anymore. And that creates a vicious cycle in which social welfare, benefit of the people, aggregate level declines. I think that's the challenge. Now coming to, if you think about the rationale for those policies, they have changed over time. Now, we have just finished a study on Punjab and Rajasthan, looking at that particular question for the World Bank. And what we see, unless climate smart technologies are adopted, Punjab can run out of groundwater in 40 years. This is a simulation model, impact model. Rajasthan, unless they take it, the situation they have in here, they are likely to face severe food security crisis in 30 years. So we have not published those results yet. The question is, if that is the case, what are the alternatives? Alternative is to gradually eliminate those incentives. This is not about India. It doesn't have to be India specific. We see the same thing in Philippines, Vietnam, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka. Honorable Ananda is here. This is all everywhere. The question is to get out of them gradually, effectively, people have to see the benefit of moving away from this systematically. There, we are basically proposing this water efficient rice farming. So they do that reduces their cost, and they see the benefit of themselves. So in every single technology that the CGIAR system has identified over 10-year period with funding from all partners, including Gates Foundation, all of those technologies are not being scaled out. So we are right now, IPRI is doing a project with SARC, but it's becoming extremely difficult to implement it because of geopolitical issues and all of that. But idea was precisely that. There are identified climate smart technologies. What will a country need in terms of investment? Can we support those countries, do those analysis? And then how do they scale it up in the future? But it is proving very difficult. I think that's why, as Purvi pointed out before, we need a platform, we create platform of the practitioners. From that platform, it can be easier. And that was one of the reasons we have signed a MOU with the Bay of Bengal Initiative for Multisectoral Technical and Economic Cooperation. And we'll be signing it on the 5th. And we are thinking of creating those platforms from which we can take this research evidence to that platform. The reason is very clear. BIMSTEC or SARC, they can organize ministerial meeting every year, the whole multiple ministerial level meeting, but they don't have the content or the platform to communicate these messages to the key policymakers. So I think that's where we plan to make some contribution. And thanks to Foundation again for supporting this initiative when it was pretty uncertain at that point. So thank you, Purvi, for that support. It's coming to fruition. Thank you. I don't know if I answered your question.
So as you said, it's a complicated question. So there are a bunch of questions I have. Dr. Ananda, you want to kind of comment?
Yeah, I thought of adding few things that in this, I think it's a very important topic that Dr. Rashid was mentioning. We were trying to do a couple of experiments with the IMI here. One is this calculating the nutrient loading coming in the drainage. Now we found in one of those irrigation systems that are leaking the irrigation water, and also about 40% of the nitrates applied. So that's a huge amount of losses. And then unfortunately that lands in a wetland that is it's a bird park, and it's a migratory bird sanctuary, and it dilutes the salinity, and so the birds don't have the food, the prawns and things like that. So now the question is, how do you put that into perspective? The economic side of loss of tourism, loss of imported fertilizer, and then that's where I think one of the things that we are also trying to do is this ecosystem accounting. I think you need to put that in rupees and cents and say it, okay, now, and then probably if we are lucky, we could bring the health side of it. Because when you start leaking the metals and other pollutants, then there's a lot of unknowns here. But I think if you can close the gap of these losses and the health aspects and the disaster aspects and the other sector impacts, and then start connecting, we might start seeing a breakthroughs now. Even if you take the simple example of soil erosion, people don't see uh, the the whole chain, like the how erosion is impacting your hydropower reservoirs and the siltation and then the power generation. It goes like the whole continuum goes. So, but we don't talk them as is like a connected piece. So I think that's somewhere so where, and also the awareness education, how people will see these ecosystem things, like how does the erosion happen and how the soil gets dislodged. What can you do to prevent it? So those are the type of simple examples. Thank you. Over.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Ananda.
Can
I think
can I
just
just
to be,
can I come in for a minute for this?
Sure, Dr.
Yeah, so I think that's where the answer lies in the second part of the title of the session. Finding climate adaptive solutions. You're talking of soil erosion. You're talking about nutrient leaching out, and that's where I think some of the technologies we are working at TERI, for example, mycorrhiza is one. We're trying to bring the nature back into the soil, so that mycorrhiza has many purposes. One is it's helping the plant acquire more nutrition from the soil. Second, it's capturing more carbon, and at the same time helping in amelioration of the soil, basically. So that's one adaptive solution. Nothing new. We just picked it up from the nature itself. The second is moving on to things like nano fertilizers, where the requirement of a nano fertilizer is about almost 1/100th of what is we are doing in terms of broadcasting. The green revolution, I think this is what it did. It basically dumped a lot of urea and other nutrients in the soil. Now we are going back, and I think even the government of India has approved nano fertilizers on a testing system based. I think nano urea is already in the market, and TERI's nano urea and DAP is also coming. So what is doing? It's again addressing many issues. One is energy saving, because the cost of manufacturing. Second, of course, the very important is the ecological, amelioration. You're putting less at the time when it's actually required. So that's much better management. So I think we need to look at some such solutions which have immediate impact.
Yeah. I'll just throw it up to the audience, because I've been told we have limited time, and I just want to be fair to the audience. So I see a number of hands, but I would want to start with the lady at the back. Please introduce yourself, and do we have a mic for... Please state your name and your organization.
Good afternoon. The mic is working, is it? Hello. So I'm working for developing different nano fertilizers, nanotechnologies. And why we got into developing nano fertilizers was, yes, we wanted to help the entire agriculture ecosystem, but also the government is giving a great push to it, because government has multiple agenda behind it. One is to reduce subsidy. Second is to decrease the amount of imports that we do for fertilizers. Third is to give some benefit to the farmers and also the ecosystem. But I mean, this is for nano fertilizers. Similarly, there are many other technologies that can be brought into focus and given to the farmers. But this connect, I mean, how these technologies would connect to the farmer, that actually needs a lot of support from the government. So, I mean, I would advocate for training the farmers simultaneously.
Sure. Thanks. I'll go to this table. Yeah, please. My name is Dr.
Example, if you wanted to bring about change and you wanted to get rid of, you have a water problem and you wanted to get rid of rice, why didn't you incentivize, like boiling a frog, 1 rupee, if you wanted to bring in, let's say, pulses, keep increasing the price of pulses every year on year so that the man automatically over a period of time shifts. So, great ideas, but unless you have a connect with the end user to make it, in his interest, I think we're going to have a big problem.
Fair point. Okay, just please. Yeah, okay. Please go ahead.
Good afternoon. I am Surendra Makhija from Jain Irrigation Systems. We have the technology to combat climate risk and have a climate smart agriculture. We're all discussing it, but in isolation and in silos. We discuss energy, we discuss nano fertilizer, we're discussing crop production and water. The simple solution, time tested and proven, which ensures calibrated application of water, calibrated application of fertilizers, and using less energy and multiplying the yield using less resources many times over. And the technology is called drip irrigation system. We're already using it in this country. Almost 10 million hectares of area is under drip irrigation and micro irrigation system. A country like Israel does not let us even a drop of water wasted. They have very limited resources on water, but they're one of the biggest exporters of fruits and vegetables to Europe. So they're producing a lot more with a lot less. And the only way you can think about combating the climate risk is going to be producing a lot more with lot less.
Sure. Thank you, sure.
And that is how it is going to be. You are talking about nano fertilizers. How are you going to deliver nano fertilizers into
in the interest of time, sir? Please.
How are you going to deliver nano fertilizers to the plant? Do you have any mechanism of doing that? Again, broadcasting it, putting in the water?
It's not. I think it's a spray mechanism. What we're looking at is
even then, sir, you will have to listen.
No, but it depends what you want to do.
Gentlemen at the back, please.
Yeah. Hello. Am I audible? Yeah. Thank you. I am Siddharth Chaturvedi from IFCO Kisan, and the whole buzz of nano which is going on. I should say we are the proud implementers of nanotechnology in this country. And I'm from the Agri-Tech division, and we are the proud partners of IFPRI as well, where we are implementing the nutrition smart agriculture, specifically for iron-rich pearl millet, which we have done for this season in 1,500 acres. So am I allowed to ask a question, sir, to the panelists? So my question is with one with Dr. Kiran and as well as Dr. Shahid. First with Dr. Shahid, as we know that for all these climate smart technologies, for any crop specific, if we take, when we increase some of the qualities of a crop which is suitable for climate, the other benefits, maybe its yield or something goes down, which we have seen in many varieties. So what happens, the ultimate overall economic realization for farmers, it is not happening in that way. So how do we address that issue? Nutrition is accepted, yield goes down. So there is a gap. So how do we fulfill that?
So we'll come to the answers in a go so that we can take some more questions from the audience. There's one lady at the back, and then we'll move to this side, if that's okay.
Hi, everyone. So my name is Alokita. I'm a program officer at Organic and Fair Trade Cotton Secretariat. We are a relatively new organization. We are working on seed sovereignty and also on the bio inputs. So I have one question from a panelist. We are talking a lot about fertilizers and agriculture, but let's begin from the soil. There are a lot of subsidies provided, but still there's a lot of research what we have done and also what has been published in the media. A lot of research says that in the Indian context, there is a widespread deficiency of organic carbon and micronutrients. It has been observed that there's the deficiency of 97% of samples were deficient in nitrogen and 83% in phosphorus and 71% in potassium. So my question is, with such large scale deficiency in our soil, and especially in the context of organic carbon, where is this entire ecosystem going? Are we going right in the direction? Sustainable agriculture, when we talk about it, begins from the soil, but with this depletion rate, what are we actually trying to achieve?
Thank you. Thank you. We'll move to this side. Yeah. To the lady in the middle, and then you can maybe pass it on to that gentleman. Either ways, you can.
Yeah, my name is Raj. I am from Nagpur. As we are talking about some facts and figures, I just want to highlight agricultural contribution to the national income of India and GDP used to vary from 82 to 85% before 2-3 decades. Before Corona, it reached down to 11.9, and last current updated figure is just 8.1. Whereas we still have 69% people by profession as a farmer and 71% land comes under agriculture sector. Why the contribution has degraded to such a bad level? And another question is, we have 12 or 13 climatic zones. I guess it was 12 and now it has become 13. Why there is no agricultural policy to suggest which type of crop should be taken in that particular crop agroclimatic zone? And yeah, that's it.
And you want this panel to answer that question?
Anyone can answer. So on this basis, India is no more agrarian country. So this is a very alarming thing.
Fair enough.
Hello, I am Pallavi Das from Wildlife Institute of India. Well, pollinators play a major role in food production, but also they are threat due to climate change. So my question is there any strategy for conserving pollinators also?
The mic there, ma'am. Yeah.
Thank you. Ranjita from the International Rice Research Institute. 2 quick comments. Yes, we have a lot of climate smart technologies, agriculture technologies that have been developed, but let's understand that technologies are necessary but not sufficient. There are no silver bullets here. I go back to the example that Shahid gave of Green Revolution. Green Revolution worked because a number of pieces of that puzzle fell into place, either serendipity or by design, but that happened. And I think that's a great example. Climate change is complex, agriculture is complex, societies are complex, and those intersections of all those become much more complex. No simple solutions. You need combinations of interventions that can make effective solutions. So let's not just work with a single technical solution and then say this is going to change everything. One thing that I do want to flag is we've heard a lot about the economics, environment. Yes, very, very important. Somebody brought it up. What about the people, the society? Still in Asia, significant part of agriculture and food systems labor comes from women. None of the climate smart technologies have been designed keeping in women in view. It's an afterthought. We have evidence to show that we don't have evidence to show whether they are able to access them, benefit from them. Something to think about as we think of data, Purvi. Huge gap there. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot. So we'll pause at the moment, allow the panelists to react because I see there are a lot of comments around the connect, around women empowerment, around a lack of technology proliferation. And I see more of comments and a bit of frustration as to why we are not doing more. I'll request the panelists to respond one by one. And in the interest of time, we'll see if we can take more questions. I'll request the organizers to give us maybe 5 more minutes. So there's a lot of energy in the room, and let's not kind of let that dissipate. So if we can go start with Dr. Kiran and in sequence.
Yeah, no, I will just come to your question about, breeding. So I don't think breeders are breeding only for one trait. And that's when I mentioned about one is a modernized plant breeding. Second is the pipeline approach. So when a breeder starts breeding, he or she is not looking at, okay, I just have to increase iron or zinc. It's a whole package. So any product which is coming in the marketplace, the nutrition, for example, is internalized into it. Your prime aim is, okay, I want to develop groundnut for this particular zone for dry land, less water. But it doesn't mean you're just breeding groundnut which can grow in the with less water, but doesn't have other traits. So they all have to be part of, and in fact, the government is not allowing, like they've asked to internalize the nutrition part of it. So unless you have a base level of say, iron or zinc in pearl millet, the variety will not be approved. So that's, I think it's taken care of. And that's when I think the ICR and other breeding, private sector, for example. So that's my.
Dr. Mehta, any reactions?
Only about 4 minutes. So just one sentence is to, I think any of the climate adaptation related solutions that we talk about, whether it's fertilizer or breeding methods or trait, it does not, what is very important is to sort of mainstream it and make everything that we do climate sensitive, rather than having a very separate climate only type approach in technology development or technology dissemination, and with equity to your comment, Ranjita.
Okay, Purvi has responded to Ranjit. I don't have to. I was not going to anyway, but I'll take the question on why farmers are not taking it. Because if you try to promote biofortified rice or a commodity pearl, their productivity goes up, but productivity goes down, nutrition goes up. So in optimum policy, there are two components. One is the tangible benefit, and other was the intangible benefit. The tangible benefit is dollars and cents, rupees, right? So intangible part, that is where society has a responsibility. So if you do believe in this crop is going to improve the health of the next generation, they'll be more productive, they can transform their economy, you invest in that non-tangible. That part is missing in all the effort IPRI has taken in Harvest Plus. So we have to work together to address it in the future. Thank you.
Yeah, Dr. Ananda, any quick comments from your side?
Two things comes to my mind is that one is that I think we are doing a decent job of education and awareness and saying why this technology, why people should believe in it, why, and the relevance of it. I think we have a great room for improvement in that area to push the policies as well as technologies. The second part is the precision angle on all these decisions, spatially as well as technology, that site-specific crop areas to all these things with the precision thinking in mind. Thank you. Over.
Thank you. Are there any really burning questions that can't be taken offline? Because we're really out of time. So, okay, last question, please. Yeah, the mic is coming to you. Just hold on.
Thank you. Avinav from GIVET, German Development Corporation. My question is, we are talking a lot about what can be done, but what if the scenario at present and we had failed maybe for last 10 years, 20 years? We talked about Punjab, but crop diversification had not been done. We are talking about depleting groundwater level and still it's depleting. We are talking about having other places where we can grow more crops and reduce fertilizer subsidy and water and everything, but it was the same case for last 20 years. With the esteemed panel, I want to know, as present and the today's scenario, what if your vision look like that is going to happen, rather than what if our wish it will happen? Thank you.
Any reactions? Any of the panelists, please? Okay, this will be answered offline. The question is noted, and I'll just request Dr. Manish Anand now to give us the closing comments. And thanks to the audience for being so engaged and asking very incisive questions. My only submission is that I think at least I'm speaking on behalf of the panelists here, that in their limited power, they're trying to do everything possible, especially with the focus on smallholder farmers and the connect. And there's a long way to go, and I think we all are accountable. Dr. Anand.
Thank you, Siddharth. And thank you, Siddharth, for excellently moderating this session. A lot of good insights and maybe some takeaways also. First of all, I'd like to congratulate and thanks the panelists for the excellent contribution, and also the audience for the active participation in the session. My job is also to more in terms of summarize what has been the overall, like more in terms of key takeaways from here, and also put some thought-provoking way forward as well, since we are talking about a topic which is very much about adaptation, and we need to adapt in a real-time basis, and at the farm level, the farmers and all. So more in terms of the key findings, there has been an overall consensus that we need a systems approach, and that systems approach has to be across sectors, including agriculture, livestock, fisheries, and all vulnerabilities in these systems sectors, and also across scales. So it's local, regional, national, as well as international, global. And we need to understand these systems approach. And also incremental approach is not going to be more in terms of the way forward. We need a transformative adaptation approach. And since we are talking in the context of global south, the issue of embedding it within the just transition framework is also very evident, and you have all discussed about small marginal farmers and all this. So we need a just and equitable transition when we are talking about effective adaptation outcomes. So that point has been well laid out, more in terms of going for a systems approach. Dr. Ananda has also talked about more in terms of ecosystem accounting and the role of governance, more in terms of the top level and how it can flow down at various levels. So that's a very important key takeaway when we are talking about governance approach for such adaptation. So it's a lesson for entire global south as well. Dr. Rashid has touched upon a very important topic on I would call it as a science technology society interaction, and which was very much had happened when we are talking about the green revolution. But when we are talking in the context of sustainability and adaptation, so there is a greater need for societal interaction, more in terms of the taking farmer into account when we are talking about technology development, R&D, and all. So there is a greater need and scope for that kind of interaction, and I think we need to gear up on that. Dr. Sharma has talked about a very important about the governance aspect, and that should cover issues of innovation, capacity building, then also more in terms of how we are going to scale up various technologies when we are, and we had from Dr. Rashid's deliberation also found that there are a lot of technologies available, but it's not being getting adopted. So what sort of like scalability framework, so to say, we need when we are talking about effective adaptation outcomes? Another aspect is also more in terms of the finance, which has been raised, and that's the core. I think technology and finance are the core when we are talking about that, and it is highly skewed towards mitigation, and we need for adaptation as well, and that has Dr. Mehta has also like come out very vociferously on that, and that's the need. And also another aspect is more in terms of when we are talking about the policy research is in terms of way forward is looking at the various trade-offs between these policy instruments and tools which we have used, be it in terms of direct regulation or information, or in terms of strengthening the network structures or the economic instruments we are talking about. So what sort of trade-offs? So we don't have much evidences on that front, more in terms of in different contexts, how these trade-offs are operating. And so we need to more in terms of focus towards that as well when we are talking about climate change adaptation in the context of agriculture as such. So these were some of the key findings, and I saw a lot of insights coming in from the participants as well on these fronts. And we look forward to continue our discussion on these aspects and topics, and we look forward to your engagement. Please feel to write to us and get in touch, and it will be good to carry over the discussion. So I'll not take much time since we are already crossed the time and lunch is there. So I'd like to thank everyone. So over to him.
Thank you, the panelists for coming over here. It was such a wonderful session. I would now request everyone to move to the Margosa lawn for lunch. You can connect to the panelists over lunch. Thank you.